Hello, Professor Toybox here, along with Sorcerer's Apprentice Mickey, and we're back in my little Lion King toy box for part 3 of my 6-part mini-series on camera tutorials. So far, we've looked at the target camera and the angled camera, and today we'll look at the bird's eye camera, and you'll find that in the Creativitoys drawer, of course, with the other cameras. This camera provides a top-down view, and it works very similar to the angled camera that we looked at last week. So let's go ahead and put one down about the same spot we've placed the other cameras before. And just like those cameras, you can't do anything with this until you hook it up and activate it with a logic connection. So we'll come over to our little button once more, do a new logic connection when pressed. And we come to the camera, and once again you see we have the same two behaviors. You can activate the camera, which turns it on, and deactivate the camera, which turns it off. So we'll go ahead and do the activate. And it's the third video I've done this now, so you can kind of see all the cameras work very similar to each other. And that's kind of good for consistency. But let's go ahead and push the button and see what happens. Alright, so as you can see, this camera looks down on the player, and by default it follows the player as they move around on the ground there. This view can be useful when players need to guide their character over narrow ledges, or through a minefield, or around various obstacles that they need to avoid. And just like with the angled camera, the location of the camera in the toy box doesn't really matter, because the camera view will always be from directly above the player. And you'll notice I had placed the camera way over here, and when I pushed the button, the camera was directly over top of me. I'll go ahead and exit out of that view. Now, even though the location of the camera doesn't matter, the orientation of it does. And you'll notice the little camera reel is up on the top on the right, and that indicates the top of the camera. And so you'll remember the button was at the top of the screen. But if we rotate this in that direction, and then we go and push the button, you'll notice the button is now on the left part of the screen and not near the top. And so the orientation of the camera matters, because that determines which way is up. And so we'll come back into Spark mode and put that orientation back. And that's very similar to what we saw last week with the angled camera, is that the orientation of it matters. Now let's go ahead and review the properties, and this has many of the same properties that the other two cameras have. So once again we have the defined duration, and if we turn that on, then however many seconds we set this bar to is how long the camera will stay on until it automatically turns itself off, and I don't need to demo that again. You'll notice once again there's no target camera target property, and so this camera will only look at the player. You can't have it look at a locator or an actor. There are no new properties that are here, so all of these we've seen before, but there are a few little differences. Once again, the camera type is limited to follow and stationary, and if we change that to stationary, that works very similar to what we saw with the angled camera last week. And I'll just demo that real quick. So we push the button. We have the same overhead view, but now as we move, the camera doesn't follow us around. So we can run off screen, we can run back. And that's to be expected. The other cameras work the exact same way. Start transition and end transition. These work the same as we've seen with the other cameras. Once again, I could not get swing to work, so I can try it, but I think it's just going to do a cut. The swing is an interesting thing. It's very buggy. When it works, it's really cool, but yeah, that just did a cut. What normally will happen is that this camera view will transition or swing up to where the other camera is, so it creates a very dynamic transition. But I haven't been able to get that to work reliably or consistently. So what are you going to do? Glow through is the same as you saw, that had the little outline of Mickey underneath the button as he pushed it, and you can turn that off. Zoom distance is a little interesting though, so you'll notice when I push the button, Mickey was pretty close to the camera, and that's because this camera has a bounding box that's kind of tall, and I put it right down on the ground. And so with that property set to use the camera position for the zoom distance, there's not much distance between there and the ground, and so that's why Mickey shows up pretty close to the camera when I turn it on. Let me go ahead and turn that view back to follow. Now I could move that camera up, of course, and that would change that. The other option is I can turn this off, and then again it will use the zoom distance for the actual distance from the camera to Mickey. And so if we come out here, now Mickey will be a little bit further away than he was before, because now we're 20 units higher versus what looks like 2 blocks or 8 units there. So that's that property. Now I'm going to go ahead and leave this off so that we're zoomed out a little bit, and I'll show you the offsets because this isn't quite the same as the other two. I mean, they work very similar, but when I think of vertical offset, I'm thinking of vertical this way, up and down. And that's not actually, in this case, what that offset is. It's actually, well, let's just go ahead and demo it. So I'm going to set this to 5. And with the other cameras, it was kind of what you saw was more of a vertical type offset, where it seemed like it placed the camera higher. But in this case, the camera is directly over Mickey, so it doesn't really make the camera higher. What it does is it pushes Mickey down towards the bottom of the screen. So there's an offset. And so this is good if I want to be playing a game where I'm moving upward on the screen, because that gives me more time to react. Of course, there's less time to react to something going downward. But that's what that offset does. So unlike the target camera and the angled camera, where it seemed like it moved the camera upward, it doesn't actually do that with this camera. It's just changing Mickey's offset in the screen. So I'll put that down. And the horizontal offset does the same thing, just in the other direction. Now, for the player viewport options up here, right now it's working, of course, on the triggering player, and we have all the same options here that we had under the other 2 cameras, and they work exactly the same. And the only one that I really want to kind of show anything for is the shared viewport once again, just because it's a little bit different with each camera. The basic principle is the same, but it operates a little differently. And I'm going to need a second character here. I forgot to get one out. So let me come over to my case, and I'm going to put down Blue. And I got to grab a controller. You'd think I would have prepared a little better for this. There we go. I'm usually much more prepared and have everything right here ready to go. But
Well, hey now, it's good to meet you. You just hang on, and old Baloo's gonna show you how it's done.
So there's Baloo. All right, so now we have 2 players. Let's go ahead and activate the camera. And once again, you see the camera zooms out to keep both players in view. And the difference this time, though, is that we're looking at a down on both players. So it's not actually centered on any one player. It's just trying to keep both players in the middle of the screen as close as it can. And as we move further away, then it zooms out to try to keep both players in view. And so with this camera, though, I kind of find it a little bit disconcerting when the camera is constantly going up and down as both players would be moving around. The other cameras zoom in and out, but it just kind of seems like, I don't know, it's just the view, the way the angle camera is, or the target camera is, the way they look at an angle just seems a little bit better, because they're looking not directly down. So I get a little bit disoriented.
All the excitement around here.
I get a little bit disoriented when with the camera going up and down here. Gives me a little bit of motion sickness, so I'm not really crazy about that. But that's how that works with this one. I love blue. All right, last thing we'll go ahead and look at. Let's go ahead and take blue out of here. So we'll drop out. That'll make it a little less distracting. Last thing we'll look at are the logic connections. And once again, we come in and do a new logic connection. It's the same ones we've seen with the other cameras, so there's no difference here. It broadcasts this trigger signal when the camera's turned on, this one when it's turned off, and then when players exit or enter the screen view, those signals get broadcast. So nothing new there. And we'll cover the path connection in a future video. So that's it for the bird's eye camera. Next time we'll look at the sidestep camera. Meanwhile, I hope these tutorials on cameras have been useful to you so far. Some of you have commented that you are already familiar with cameras, and that's great, but I know some of the newer toy box builders probably aren't, so I want to make sure I cover everything. We'll get to some more advanced camera topics in a couple of weeks. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet or signed up to follow me on my blog, I encourage you to do so. I'll be back tomorrow with my next Disneyland episode. Until then, take care and have a great day.